Hi everyone, and welcome back to Coachy TV. In this video, we're going to talk about how to actually conduct a VO2 max test and how you can use the results from those tests to create some workout paces for you and your athletes. This is presented by myself, Kyle Giacono. I am the head boys cross country and track coach at Wharton High School in Tampa, Florida, and I have been for the last 6 years. I am USATF Level 3 Endurance Certified as well as USATF Cross Country Specialist. For the sake of this video, those are the most important things because that says that I've been trained in terms of how to use scientific approaches to create these workouts as opposed to just kind of guessing or hearing from somebody else that these workouts have worked. I'm trying to show you guys from a scientific perspective how these workouts actually can help your athlete long term because the science says they work, not I think they work. So we talked about this in the last video, and if you want a full description, go ahead and click on the link here about why you'd want to use VO2 max testing to create your workout paces versus goal testing. You can take a look at it on the screen here. And if you want a full description, go ahead and click on the link from what we talked about previously. VO2 max, just to touch on this a little bit, is your body's maximum ability to use oxygen. I'll create a whole video just talking about VO2 max, the different mechanics of it. But for right now, just know that VO2 max is your body's maximum ability to use oxygen, which is usually expressed in terms of milliliters of oxygen consumed per kilogram of body weight per minute. An untrained human is about 36, which is the same as a pig, but with training, proper scientific based training, you can basically double a person's VO2 max. So testing VO2 max, there are 4 main field tests you can use in the sense of using them to create workout paces from. So we have the VHIL protocol, which is 1 mile to exhaustion, and dividing that by 0.91. This is really good for middle distance athletes. And when I say middle distance athletes, not just a miler. I'm talking about a kid that really is just an 800-meter kid. The mile is almost too long for them in terms of race dynamic. And you're probably not going to have a ton of these kids. I've had 2 or 3 in my entire time coaching. But this could be an option for a kid that's just not going to give you a good 2 mile. Or for lesser trained kids that are just brand new and if you run an extra mile on them, it's just going to really fall off and not give you usable test data. The Birchford protocol, which is to run 10 minutes to exhaustion and figure out their pace. This is probably the best and most accurate. VO2 max is typically about 10 minutes, how fast you can run consistently for 10 minutes. But it's kind of a nightmare to actually execute unless you have a very small group, because if you have a team of 20, 25 kids and they're starting at one point at the same time and finishing all at different points, unless they all have really good GPS watches, you're not going to get as accurate as the data as you actually need. So if you have a small group, especially if you had like a really elite small group, this would be the best to use if you can actually manage to pull it off. But I recommend using the Astron protocol. This says to run 2 miles or a 3K, especially if you're trying to get a lesser trained kid to bump up to this protocol after a few test runs. Run this 2 miles to exhaustion and then figure out what their pace is. You can do this very easily with the high school team and get good usable data. If you have a 400-meter kid that you're trying to move up for the very first time to maybe be on your 4x8 team, maybe before they get to a VHIL protocol, you can take 65% of their date pace exhaustive 400 meters to get their VO2 max. If I have any sprint coaches watching, this would be like your extensive interval or extensive tempo kind of workouts. This would be to set up for this kid as you're trying to maybe move them up until they're ready to run maybe a VHIL protocol if they are a true 400-meter kid moving up. This is going to give you really good VO2 max, and again, the velocity at which your body reaches VO2 max. That's just what that little V means here, and this is way more important for you as a coach because this gives you a pace that you can operate from. So the velocity at which your body reaches the maximum oxygen consumption, VO2 max, that you can set these workout paces from. So to calculate some of this data from a VO2 max test, I'm going to show you using the Astron protocol. It's the one that I recommend. I'm going to take you in depth through an Astron protocol run, but then I'll go at the very end and show you guys how you could do it with the VHIL protocol, the Taylor protocol, or the Birchford protocol. So To do this, you would have a really good warm up on the front end, whatever you do before a meet or before a really hard workout. With your warm-ups, your dynamic stretches. You're probably going to have some kind of continuous run in there, your drills, maybe your A skips, B skips, and some strides in there, a good solid warm-up so that they're ready for this high-intensity type of work. You're going to run your 2 miles, best pace, and really emphasize best pace with them because you're going to be using this to set some workout targets for a number of weeks. Tell them to be smart about how they're actually doing it. And just really emphasize that it needs to be their best exhaustive effort. So let's just say, for example, you have a kid that goes out and runs 10:30. This means that they have a VO2 max of 5:15 on that day. It is their date pace. You really need to think of it in that respect. They're not going to be here all year. With good training, they're going to move it up. But you need to work with this number in mind because that's what they can run on that day. Now, just to sort of give you guys to head off any issues you might have, your newer kids are going to run what you ask them to run. It's not going to be any issue. But your kids that come back that are more higher trained, higher level, they're going to balk at this early just because they're going to say, Coach, I'm not ready to run a good 2 mile yet. And you say, that's okay. I need to know what your date pace is so that I can create these workout targets that are safe and effective for you. If they're coming off a detraining period, they shouldn't be at their PR pace. A 9:30 kid or a under type of person is not going to come in running that if you've given them some detraining. So just realize this is their date pace. They're not going to be here for the whole season, but you need to know where they are today to set these workout targets from. So you're going to take 5 times 60 plus 15, so you have 315 seconds that you're dealing with. Their body reaches VO2 max at 5:15, but 3:15 is what we really want to look at in terms of calculating their workout targets. So one such workout you're going to want to do obviously with your kid is aerobic threshold or easy pace runs, your continuous runs. This is the staple of a distance runner's workout regime. This should be 65 to 70% of their current VO2 max. In the next week or so, I'll do videos on aerobic threshold and some of these other workout paces I'm going to talk about. But for right now, I just want you to know how to calculate these things so you can set these workout parameters. So 315 divided by 0.65, 485 seconds. This kid's slowest part of their aerobic threshold should be at 8:05. And then for the 70%, 315 divided by 0.07, 450 seconds. By my English teacher math, that tells me 7 minutes and 30 seconds. This kid can be running anywhere from 7:30 to 8:05 and be in this training target, aerobic threshold or easy pace type workouts. Some of your kids may think that feels a little bit too slow coming into the season. Again, this is their date pace, and it should be, as the workout says, an easy type workout. For you, you may want to shrink the target a little bit. I don't. I give the kid the entire range when I'm calculating this for them so that they know anywhere between 7:30 and 8:05 they're good. Maybe it's a hot day. Maybe they didn't hydrate the way they were. Maybe they're stressed about something and they run a little bit slower. They say, Coach, I ran 8:03. Fine, great, perfect. You're right where we needed you to be. Or, Coach, I felt great. I ran 7:31 today for the whole thing. Perfect. That's fantastic. Same aerobic development is going on here. Take a look at a different type of workout, a lactic threshold or a hard tempo workout. This is at 85% of your VO2 max, and again, I'll do a whole video on this just showing why it should be at 85% of your VO2 max. This would be 315 divided by 0.85, and you've got 370 seconds. That is a 6:10 workout. If you want to run lactic threshold, that hard tempo run, which I admittedly did way too many of years ago before the kids were really improving at the level that they have been the last few years. But there's a place for this in every training season. So to run tempo run, a hard tempo would be 6:10, but that's not the only kind of tempo run there are. There's also moderate tempo, which I do a lot more of in recent years. A moderate tempo run is 78 to 82% of your VO2 max. Go through the same mechanics in terms of dividing your seconds by either 0.78 or 0.82, and this kid would run a moderate tempo workout between 6:24 and 6:54. We look at a workout called aerobic power. You may hear this called long intervals. I cringe to hear people call these long speed workouts because they're not. Any sprint coach would tell you that anything this kind of long, 2 mile type pace, multiple minutes of a rep is not speed. But I sometimes hear it called that. So for the sake of this, I'm going to call it aerobic power. I may call it a VO2 max workout also. They're very similar because you're going to run aerobic power right in and around their VO2 max. Should be 98 to 102% of their date pace VVO2 max. So divide their seconds by those two parameters and you get 321 seconds, 521 or 308 seconds, and that's 508. Their long interval workout should be in between this range. Very critically important for aerobic power development. That longest end of their fastest end, of their aerobic system needs to be in those parameters. And as I mentioned, I'll do an entire video just on this and why that's the case. But that target has to be this kind of tight. If it's not, they're not really getting the development that you want. They're getting something else. So for example, if you have a kid that goes out and they are consistently running 95% of their VO2 max, they're not really running hard enough to train the system. If they're running at 105% of their VO2 max, a couple things could be happening there. One, they're probably running the first, say if you're doing 4 times mile repeats, the first 2 might be at 105 and then 103, and then maybe they're at 97 and then at 96. That's not really the training design either. They're getting some issues with acid developing if they're running faster than this, and that's slowing their overall workout pace. You really don't want a regression run. What I usually suggest my kids do is run at this lower number for the first half of the workout. If I've got 4 times mile, run the first one at 521 or 520. And then if you feel good on the second to last and the last one, run at 515 and then 510 or whatever. Try and make it a progression type of workout and you'll get the best bang for the buck out of this type of workout as you're actually doing it. Just make sure that as you're doing it, if you're like me, I also tend to give an average pace to my kid just so they know, hey, you ran those 4 times mile at 5:15, great job. Just make sure that you're also keeping in mind you could have a 5:15 average with none of the reps hitting that target. You really want to, for this type of development, have everybody, for this kid particularly, run 521 to 508. Using some of the other test protocol that I mentioned early on, if you wanted to use the VHIL protocol, you would run 1 mile to exhaustion and divide the time by 0.91. So let's say, for example, you have a kid run 455, multiply 4 by 60 plus 55, you're dealing with 295 seconds. Divide that by 0.91, you're dealing with 324 seconds. This kid's VO2 max is 524. They reach VO2 max at that pace. You could go back and use the aerobic threshold, lactic threshold, or aerobic power parameters that we set up before to come up with workout targets for this kid. The Birchford protocol, you run 10 minutes to exhaustion and figure out their pace. Let's say, for example, you have a kid that runs 1.75 miles. That's a VVO2 max of 543. One nice thing about the Birchford protocol is you don't have all these mechanics with doing math calculations afterward in terms of what is their VO2 max. But again, it is really sort of a nightmare to run if you have a big team. So I would say if you do use this, it's easier on the back end, but it's very, very challenging on the front end. Taylor protocol, let's say, for example, you want to use this for a kid moving up 65% of their date pace exhaustive 400, not their PR 400, what they could run that day. So let's say we have a kid that could run 50 seconds, divide that by 0.65, that equals 77 seconds. So this test parameter would say that this kid would reach VO2 max at 509. As you can see, there are some issues with a sprinter using this protocol. You're not going to have, this kid probably is not going to be able to run a 509 mile at their current state, but if they run reps like 400s at 77 seconds, it would be at that what a sprinter coach calls extensive interval or extensive tempo type of workout. And it would give you a good starting point. Let's say you'd probably maybe run this kid 400s or 600s until they're ready to run maybe an 800. And then you maybe would run the VO protocol with them later on. But it would give you some parameters for their aerobic threshold and lactic threshold workouts, what type of workouts you would give a sprinter moving up. We could discuss in some further videos. But just know that if you're using this protocol, you're probably not going to be able to then throw a 1,000 type workout at them all of a sudden at 509. You're going to need to build up to that point. You really want to, I mean, should I have, if I've got maybe a team of 25, should I have data on all those kids? I would say yes. You want to have the training targets on all of them. You want to test all of them, and you want to create a training profile for them. Once you get used to it, it's not that difficult to go through and run all those numbers on everybody. If you got a good TA or something like that who's good at math, you can kind of assign them the task and just sort of check them periodically. But it's a good thing to have for all those kids because you want to know that you're training them in the right training design. Or at the very, very least, you want to make sure that your whole varsity and maybe your top JV kids have good working targets so you know that you're working them in the correct training zone. So have this data for all of your kids, or at the very least, most of them. You need to do this every couple weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. Adaptation takes 2 to 4 weeks, but you really want to make sure that you're not letting them over-adapt. So that's why I suggest every 2 to 3 weeks doing something like this. Do not think that you're wasting a day by doing this. This is a great aerobic power development type workout. Going out and running 2 miles to exhaustion, that's what VO2 max is. How fast can you run 2 miles, or about 10 minutes? And this is great development with it. And it's also going to give them some help in terms of how to run maybe these longer races. If you have kids that burn out really early in the 2 mile or the mile, this will give them experience of how to reverse split a workout or a race and really give them some help as they do this a few more times. So make sure that you're doing this so that you're keeping their intensity in the right zone. Also, doing it every 2 to 3 weeks. If you go 2 or 3 of these cycles and a kid does not get better, so we're talking 6 weeks to 9 weeks, and they don't improve their VO2 max, it tells you that there's probably something else going on, and you need to look at it a little bit closer. It'll give you sort of a red flag. Maybe they're running their workouts too hard. Their easy days are not easy. Their medium days are not medium, and maybe then their hard days can't be as fast as they need to, their aerobic power type days, because they're getting just destroyed on those what should be easier type aerobic runs. Or maybe it means that they're not running fast enough. Maybe they're not getting the training stimulus they need. Maybe they're too slow on their lactic threshold. Maybe they're too slow on their VO2 max. And maybe it just means that you need to have a conversation with the kid or their parent. Maybe there's something else going on that's just really, really stressing them. And maybe you have to take something off of them in order to get some of these performances to actually get back to where they need to go. So I hope this helps anybody that's wanting to use some actual usable test data to set workout paces and not just try and guess that maybe we should run this pace today and maybe we should run this pace tomorrow. Very, very important though as you're doing this, if you're going to run the test, make sure you're using it. If you have a kid that comes in and maybe there may be a day that they just don't run it and they're not giving full effort. Maybe there's terrible weather. Don't do the test in bad weather, first off. But something is off. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you have a kid comes in after a detraining period. Maybe it's a 9:30 kid, a really, really strong runner, and they can only manage a 10:35 or something. Don't get ahead of yourself. Don't put the cart before the horse and try to say, we're going to go in between and we're going to make their aerobic threshold 75%. You're going to probably run into some issues long term. You're training them out of their training zone. Tune in here in the next few days. I'll have whole videos on aerobic threshold, lactic threshold, and aerobic power, so we can go into that a little bit more. But I was guilty of that early on. I wanted the kids to, even though I wanted to take a scientific approach and I knew what the data said, it took me some time to be comfortable with the fact that training them in their current pace, current aerobic fitness, is the right way to go. And sometimes that means that their easy days are easier than even what the kids might want to do early on. But you need to test them, test them often, and then you need to trust what the data tells you and go from there. If you have any questions that I did not go over, please feel free to ask them in the comments below. If you like the video or you want to see some more, please think about subscribing or liking the video. It'll help me out tremendously. If you have any ideas for videos you'd like to see, please leave those in the comment section below. Until next time, this has been Coachy TV, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.